Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. What you will be watching is actually a recorded version of what we did live March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. We first did Bill, Bob, Lois, and Friends, First Voices, First Steps, written stories that were compiled from the Big Book and other literature as an event. And the event was a production originally performed for the Recovery Expo and Theater Event fundraiser for the Lost and Found Club of Marion County. Our loved and valued sponsors are Unboxed Productions, Friends of Recovery Marion County, Small Cakes, We Are All In, Candy and Ted Cole of Home Run Realty, Helen Haskell of Mothers Against Medical Error, artist Janae, Lisa Goodmanson Chance, Anonymous, Dee and Daryl Collier, Mia Munn, Sharon Browning Bird, and Linda Smith, Elizabeth and Ron Ewers, Kathleen Fountain, Reverend Michael Beck, and many other anonymous supporters who we're so grateful for. As some of us who are in the show are not personal friends with Bill, as some say, but we are loving supporters of those in the recovery community, and we value their support and contributions and sponsorship by way of their talents. Our narrators today for our show are both myself and my co-founder, Jan Thomas. Jan Thomas, would you like to say something to our audience?
Just welcome. Welcome to everyone.
Great. We'll be seeing more of Jan in just about 5 seconds. So without further ado, what you will be hearing is a little bit of the history, the 12-step program, and then you will see a meeting in progress, an open meeting set somewhere in some place and time. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Bill, Bob, Lois, and Friends, First Voices, First Steps. If the ancients drank wine as our people drink rum and cider, it is no wonder we hear of so many possessed with devils. John Adams.
Franklin Pierce, our 14th president, was none too pleased with his failed renomination bid. He lamented, "What can the next president of the United States do except get drunk?"
Somehow I can't imagine Jimmy Carter ever saying that.
But his brother Billy could.
Thank you. That was funny. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My friend Jan and I thank you for being with us on a historic journey back to the future of 12-step recovery, where it started, what it became, and how we can and do recover. A random unattributable quote from Google said,
in fact, in the early republic, Americans drank quantities we would consider astounding today. In 1790, we consumed an average of 5.8 gallons of absolute alcohol annually for each drinking age individual. By 1830, that figure rose to 7.1 gallons.
The bar tab from the signing of the Declaration of Independence included, but was not limited to,
54 bottles of Madeira,
Thomas Jefferson's favorite,
60 bottles of claret,
22 of port,
8 hard cider,
12 beers,
7 bowls of alcoholic fruit punch,
8 bottles of whiskey.
Leaving European drinking practices behind, collectively, the new Americans had upped their limit on alcoholic consumption, and it was now a big problem.
It has been said that early Americans were in a perpetual state of drunkenness, drinking on average from childhood approximately 30 ounces of alcohol a day in the form of beer, wine, cider, and these same early Americans believed that there was nothing seriously wrong with indulging in that fashion. And we're fond of quoting that fun-loving early American Benjamin Franklin, who said,
"In wine there is wisdom, in beer there is freedom, and in water there is bacteria."
But time would prove that wisdom and freedom were being destroyed brain cell by alcohol. And when it became obvious that there was an issue, several abstinence groups formed, and one such group was the Washingtonians. But one by one, each group failed after brief popularity because they strayed from the subject at hand and delved into politics and other issues, diluting their mission. And poof, just like that, they were gone. And then came Carrie Nation with her axe, chopping up the taverns in America from coast to coast. And then what followed was the single most codependent legislation in American history, the 18th Amendment. Prohibition led in part by the Women's Christian Temperance Union. What a success that was. Jim Barleycorn had a field day, and speakeasy became a watchword for the day. Again, failure at every turn. Americans were not easy does it types. We were full steam ahead and damn the torpedoes when it came to trying to stop alcoholism. And the legislative lockdown on alcohol only exacerbated alcohol's hold on society.
And yet, despite this, from the earliest days of our nation's history, the search for sobriety was on the minds of the greatest thinkers of that time and was in the prayers of the spiritual leaders of the day as well. Drinking as a nation at that level was unsustainable, and as any sober person could see that. The problem was there was not a lot of sober people around.
And when the foundations of family were being destroyed, it was not long before churches were called upon to answer the cries and pleas of the families and of the citizenry for an answer. And at this point, as a nation, we were almost at a crossroads, but not quite yet. Husbands, wives, children, parents, politics, medicine, businesses, schools were all affected to one degree or another. And there was a moral terror that was happening, and nothing seemed to stem the tide.
Still, things weren't enough of a problem yet. At the same time, our collective sobriety as a nation was tested. Women's rights and the abolition of slavery coincided. It was a unique time in American history. The idea that women and people of color would do their inalienable right and coping with an ever increasingly drunk and impaired society were also on the docket. And just as the US was slowly recovering from the disaster of prohibition during the Great Depression, covering up bullet-ridden walls in city after city in the 1930s, a subtle engineering of a new way of thinking
was developing from great thinkers, philosophers, and theologians
who came together
to seek a solution to the age-old issue of alcohol and other abuse disorders. In the beginning,
as it still is today,
it was most important to tackle the first issue at hand, alcohol. And as time went on, it became clear that what they had discovered, a discipline of self-care and love and action for others, would be a part of other recovery missions.
In 1931, in Oxford, England, a group of thinkers and prayers came together, searched Holy Writ, the Bible, and other spiritual writings, read philosophers, prayed, discussed, did more research, and developed what has come to be known today as 12 steps. And those are still the foundation of the recovery movement, and many recovery modalities use these same 12 steps to this day.
But most importantly, these same 12 steps are used to help many abuse disorders, including but not limited to alcohol, such as gambling and codependency and abusive eating and other substance abuse disorders, including the drug of choice of our beloved Thomas Jefferson, laudanum, better known as opium, or in today's language, opioids.
There were actually substance abuse issues at the beginning of our nation, opium and alcohol. We are a couple of 100 years down the road of time, and yet we are still here, and we are still a nation with a problem. But now we are a nation with a treasured solution.
Yes. And tonight you will hear some of the first true voices from the beginning of the 12 steps, voices from the earliest days of this treasured solution. Originally, there were 6 principles of self-improvement, but as wisdom moved forward, those earliest steps were expanded to 12. You will hear voices from every decade, and every kind of person will be sharing their story with you.
You may even see yourself in their stories. And if you do, there will be people available who will share their experience, strength, and hope with you. These are real stories in their own words from Recovery's beloved Big Book. You will hear them in the form of an open meeting of AA, where those in recovery speak directly from their heart to yours. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
the meeting will be starting in just a moment. You will soon see a chairperson set someplace in time at her desk, and you will see the rest of the meeting unfold before you. Ladies and gentlemen, shh.
Welcome to the Friends of Recovery meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome. We are glad you are here. Nice to have you all with us. Tonight, we have an extra special speakers meeting. And tonight, for this one night only, we have speakers from every decade of 12-step recovery. Before we start, would someone get us started right by reading the Serenity Prayer?
Yes, I sure will. Hold on here just a second. Let me find it. I will get it for you. Thank you for asking me. Thank you, Rihanna. Yes, I can. I'm Sandy. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I'm happy to be with you all tonight. Our Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Always good to remind ourselves of this. And I should remember to tell you that I am Rihanna, a recovering alcoholic.
Hi, Rihanna.
Thank you, Sandy. This is a good time to read our anonymity statement. Who has the anonymity statement?
I do. Carol here.
Thank you, Carol.
And I'm thankful to be here too, a recovering alcoholic. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of our program, reminding us to place principles before personalities. Therefore, who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here.
Singleness of purpose statement, please. Who has that reading?
Hello, David, a hopeful alcoholic. No AA group or member should ever, in such a way as to implicate AA, express any opinion outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. The Alcoholics Anonymous groups oppose no one. Concerning such matters, they can express no views whatsoever.
Next, we have How It Works. Who would like to read How It Works?
Hold on a second. I might have to find that reading for you, and I will do it. Let's see. Hi, Sandy again here. Hi, I'll read for you. How It Works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, and there are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. And if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil till we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God, and may you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon, and here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery.
Who would like to take over and read our steps?
I will. Hello, I'm still Carol, and I'm still a recovering alcoholic. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
Thank you, Carol. Sandy, would you read the last 6 Steps, please.
Yes, thank you, Rihanna. Hi, everyone. Again, Sandy, still a grateful alcoholic, and we do recover. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol and Sandy. Peter, would you read the closing of How It Works?
Hello, I'm Peter. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Don't be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. Point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you. This is an open meeting of AA, and we have many guests. Tonight we are sharing big book stories, some we haven't heard for a long time. Who would like to volunteer to read the first story?
I will. This is Sandy here again.
Thank
Still
you, Sandy.
recovering. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Rihanna. So, a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. His first day of permanent sobriety was June 10th, 1935. From that time to 1950, the year of his death, he carried the AA message to more than 5,000 alcoholic men and women. And to all those, he gave his medical services without thought of charge. And here he begins. I was born in a small New England village of about 7,000 souls.
Born in a small New England village of about 7,000 souls. No beer or liquor was sold in the neighborhood except at the state liquor agency, where perhaps one might procure a pint if he could convince the agent that he really needed it. The town was well supplied with churches and schools, in which I pursued my early educational activities. My father was a professional man of recognized ability, and both my father and mother were active in church affairs. Unfortunately for me, I was an only child, which perhaps engendered the selfishness which played such an important part in bringing on my alcoholism. From childhood through high school, I was more or less forced to go to church. This had the effect of making me resolve that when I was free from parental domination, I would never again darken the doors of a church. This resolution I kept steadfastly for the next 40 years. After high school came 4 years in one of the best colleges in the country, where drinking seemed to be a major extracurricular activity. I did it more and more and had lots of fun without much grief. I seemed to be able to snap back the next morning better than most of my fellow drinkers, who were cursed or possibly blessed with a great deal of morning after nausea. Never once in my life have I had a headache, which fact leads me to believe that I was an alcoholic almost from the beginning. My whole life seemed to be centered around doing what I wanted to do, without regard for the rights or wishes or privileges of anyone else. A state of mind which became more and more predominant as the years passed. I was graduated summa cum laude in the eyes of the drinking fraternity, but not in the eyes of the dean. My next move was to take up the study of medicine entering one of the largest universities in the country. There I took up the business of drinking with much greater earnestness than I had previously shown. On account of my enormous capacity for beer, I was elected membership in one of the drinking societies and soon became one of the leading spirits. Many mornings I have gone to classes and, even though fully prepared, would turn and walk back to the fraternity house because of my jitters, not daring to enter the classroom for fear of making a scene that I should be called on for recitation. After many painful discussions, they finally gave me my credits and I migrated to another of the leading universities in the country and entered as a junior that fall. There, my drinking became so much worse that the boys in the fraternity house felt forced to send for my father, who made a long journey in the vain endeavor to get me straightened out. This had little effect, for I kept on drinking and used a great deal more hard liquor than in former years. I conducted myself so creditably that I was able to secure a much coveted internship in a Western city, where I spent 2 years. During these 2 years, I was kept so busy that I hardly left the hospital at all. Consequently, I could not get into any trouble. By this time, I was beginning to pay very dearly physically. If I had not drank, my stomach tortured me, and if I did, my nerves did the same. After 3 years of this, I wound up in the local hospital where they attempted to help me, but I would get my friends to smuggle me a quart, or I would steal alcohol from the building, so that I got rapidly worse. I think I must have been thoroughly scared by what had happened, or by the doctor, or probably both, so that I did not touch a drink again until the country went dry. With the passing of the 18th Amendment, I felt quite safe, even if I should do some drinking. At that time, I was not aware of the almost unlimited supply the government made possible for us doctors to obtain. Neither had I any knowledge of the bootlegger who soon appeared on the horizon. I drank with moderation at first, but it took me only a relatively short time to drift back into the old habits which had wound up so disastrously before. During the next few years, I developed 2 distinct phobias. One was the fear of not sleeping. The other was the fear of running out of liquor. If my wife was planning to go out in the afternoon, I would get a large supply of liquor and smuggle it home and hide it. A bootlegger had hidden alcohol at the back steps where I could get at it at my convenience. Sometimes I would bring it in my pockets, but they were inspected, and that became too risky. I used to also put it up in 4-ounce bottles and stick several of them in my stocking tops. During all this time, we became more or less ostracized by our friends. My phobia for sleeplessness demanded that I get drunk every night. But in order to get more liquor the next night, I had to stay sober during the day, at least until 4 o'clock. This routine went on with few interruptions for the next 17 years. It's really a horrible nightmare, this earning money, getting liquor, smuggling it home, getting drunk, morning jitters, taking large doses of sedatives to make it possible to earn more money, and so on ad nauseum. I used to promise my wife and friends and my children that I would drink no more. Promises which seldom kept me sober, even through the day. For the benefit of those experimentally inclined, I should mention the so-called beer experiment. When beer first came back, I thought that I was safe. I could drink all that I wanted to. It was harmless. Nobody could get drunk on beer. So I filled the cellar full with the permission of my good wife. It was not long before I was drinking at least a case and a half a day. I put on 30 pounds of weight in 2 months. I looked like a pig and was uncomfortable from shortness of breath. It then occurred to me that after one was all smelled up with beer, nobody could tell what one had been drunk. So I began to fortify my beer with straight alcohol. And of course, the result was very bad. That ended the beer experiment. About the time of the beer experiment, I was thrown in with a crowd of people who spoke with great freedom from embarrassment, which I could never do. And they seemed very much at ease on all occasions and appeared very healthy. More than these attributes, they seemed happy. I gave the matter much time and study for the next 2.5 years. But I still got drunk every night, nevertheless. I read everything I could find and talked to everyone who I thought knew anything about it. How my wife kept her faith and courage during all those years, I'll never know. She did. If she had not, I know I would have been dead a long time ago. For some reason, we alcoholics seem to have the gift of picking up the world's finest women. Why they should be subjected to the tortures we inflict upon them, I cannot explain. About this time, a lady called up my wife one Saturday afternoon, and saying she wanted me to come over that evening to meet a friend of hers who might get help for me. We entered her house at exactly 5 o'clock, and it was 11:15 when we left. I had a couple of shorter talks with this man afterward and stopped drinking abruptly. This dry spell lasted about 3 weeks. Then I went to Atlantic City to attend several days' meeting of a national society of which I was a member. I drank all the scotch they had on the train and bought several quarts on my way to the hotel. This was on Sunday. I got tight that night, stayed sober Monday till after dinner, then proceeded to get tight again. I drank all I dared in the bar, then went up to my room to finish the job. Tuesday, I started in the morning getting well organized by noon. I did not want to disgrace myself, so I then checked out. I bought some more liquor on the way to the depot. I had to wait some time for the train. I remember nothing from then on until I woke up at a friend's house in a town near my home. These good people notified my wife, who sent my newly made friend over to get me. He came and got me home to bed and gave me a few drinks that night and 1 bottle of beer the next morning. That was June 10th, 1935. That was my last drink. As I speak to you now, nearly 4 years have passed. The question which might naturally come into your mind would be, what did the man do or say that was different from what others had done or said? But this was a man who had most of all the drunkard's experiences known to man, but who had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ. That is to say, the spiritual approach. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, which was undoubtedly helpful. Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first human with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language. He knew all the answers, certainly not because he'd picked them up in some book. It's the most wonderful blessing to be relieved of the terrible curse which I was afflicted. I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. 1, a sense of duty. 2, pleasure. Because in so doing, I'm paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. And 4, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. If you think you're an agnostic or an atheist or a skeptic or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting help, if you still think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that is your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and all, and sincerely feel that you must have some help, we have an answer for you. It never fails. If you go about it with 1/2 the zeal you've been in the habit of showing when you're getting another drink, your heavenly Father will not let you down.
Someone volunteer to read Bill W.'s story.
I got you. Carol again. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master.
Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came that insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. Emotionally, I had begun the fashioning of another sort of boomerang, one that almost killed me later on. In that early period, I had to be an athlete because I was not an athlete. I had to be a musician because I couldn't carry a tune. I had to be the president of my class in boarding school. I had to be first in everything because in my perverse heart, I felt myself the least of God's creatures. I couldn't accept this deep sense of inferiority. So I became captain of the baseball team. I learned to play the fiddle well enough to lead the high school orchestra. I was the leader and I led. So it went all or nothing. I must be number one. I felt secure with the love and respect of my schoolmates. I was somebody substantial and real and lacked only one ingredient: romance. Then came the minister's daughter. In spite of my awkward adolescence, things were complete. I had romance, security, and applause. I was aesthetically happy. Then one morning, the school principal announced that my girl had died suddenly the night before. I dropped into a depression that lasted for 3 solid years. I didn't graduate. I was unable to finish because I couldn't accept the loss of any part of what I thought belonged to me. The healthy kid would have felt badly, but never would have sunk so deep or stayed submerged for so long. Then along came Lois, and I was suddenly alive again. We married during the World War when I was a young officer at New Bedford. There we were, projected among the society folk of the town. But for the first time in my life, I saw Butler. Again came that terrible feeling of inadequacy, that shy inability to speak more than 2 or 3 words in a row. But one night, someone handed me a Bronx cocktail. Liquor killed off a lot of my relatives, and I was repeatedly warned against it. Still, I took this first drink, and then another, and another. What magic! I found the elixir of life. Down went that strange barrier that had always stood between me and people around me. My new companions drew near to me, and I drew near to them. I was part of life at last. I could talk easily, I could communicate. This was the missing link. When the war was over, I returned from France, and Lois and I lived in the city. Finally, I got into Wall Street. In a few years' time, I made far too much money for one so young. I wasn't disturbed about my drinking, although Lois had become concerned. In this period, I was drinking to dream great dreams of greater power. I wanted to be a director of many large enterprises. Indeed, I was on the point of realizing my ambitions at the time of the 1929 crash when everything melted away. Although I had gone many thousands of dollars into debt, my arrogance was supreme. I looked with disgust upon the bankrupt people who were jumping from the high buildings. I said and believed, I can build all this up once more. I've done it once, I can do it again. But I didn't do it again. My alcoholic obsession had already condemned me. So I began sinking Without money or sobriety, I was discredited everywhere. Finally, I slid into a state where I was not drinking to dream dreams of power. I was drinking to numb the pain, to forget. All at once, at the very bottom of the depression, there came a business opportunity that might have meant millions for Lois and me. But I had to sign a contract which bound me legally not to drink. During the life of the agreement, I committed myself not to drink at all. This opportunity was colossal from any Wall Street point of view. I said to myself, I'll soon have Lois out of that department store where she's supporting me, and I'll make more money than I ever did. This time, we are really going to arrive. I really meant to keep my agreement. And for 3 or 4 months, I did stay absolutely sober. The new business operation began, and I went on a trip to look over an industry. One night, a few engineers and I were sitting in a hotel room. They produced a jug. With great relief, I found I could easily say no. I could think of my contract. I could think of Lois. The jug kept going around, and finally someone said, Bill, this is Applejack. Jersey Lightning, better have one. I realized that in all my drinking career, I'd never had any Jersey Lightning. Boys, one little shot won't hurt me. Both Lois and my business promise faded. At that moment, my insane obsession seized me once again. There followed 3 days of complete oblivion. Then my business partners called me on the phone and told me the deal was off. And now I really began to lose hope. My mental disintegration proceeded rapidly. Soon I was in a hospital, first of many such cures during the next 2 years. After leaving the hospital in that month, I kept sober for a while and in stark fear and constant vigilance. November came and I still had not had a drink. The fear of getting drunk was getting hazier now. I did not have to exert myself so much to resist. I actually began to talk to people about alcoholism. When I was offered drinks, I would volunteer the information I had acquired about the nature of my disease. I found this a defense against taking anything and also a justification for my former condition. Confidence was beginning to grow fast, and my fear left me. Armistice Day, 1934, rolled around. Lois had to go to the department store where she worked. Wall Street was closed down, and I began to wonder what I would do. I thought of golf. I hadn't played in a long time. I suggested to Lois that I might go over to the Staten Island where there was a public course. She couldn't conceal her apprehension, but she managed to say cheerfully, "Oh, please do. That would be wonderful." I took a bus. I found myself seated beside a man with a target rifle. We got to talking about shooting. Suddenly, our bus collided with the bus ahead of us. We waited for the next bus to come along. We noticed something that looked like a speakeasy. He said to me, "What about a little nip?" I said, "Fine, let's go." We walked inside the place. He ordered a scotch and I ordered a ginger ale. "Don't you drink?" he said. "No. I'm one of those people who can't manage it." And then I dwelt on the allergy and the obsession and the whole business of alcoholism. I told him about the terrible time I had had with liquor and how I was through with it forever. I carefully explained the whole illness to him. We got onto another bus and presently found ourselves in front of a country inn. It was noontime, and he said, "Let's have a sandwich, and I'd like another drink." We sat at the bar this time, and as I've said, it was Armistice Day. The place was filling up, and so were the customers. There was a familiar buzz which arises from drinking crowds. My friend and I continued to talk, sandwiches and another drink for him, sandwiches and ginger ale for me. My mind turned again to Armistice Day in France, to all the joy of those hours, to the great celebration. I no longer heard what my friend was saying. Suddenly, the big Irish bartender came up to us. In each hand, he held a drink. Have one on the house, boys. It's Armistice Day. Without a hesitation's notice, I picked up the liquor and drank it. My friend looked at me. My God, is it possible that you can't take a drink after what you just told me? You must be crazy. And my reply was, yeah, I am. The next morning, about 5 o'clock, Lois found me unconscious in the areaway of our house. I had fallen against the iron grating and was bleeding from a bad scalp wound. When I regained consciousness, nothing much was said. Indeed, there was nothing much to say. We both hit an all-time low. I went back to drinking 1, 2, 3 bottles of bathtub gin a day. I couldn't stop, and I knew it. Then one afternoon, the telephone rang. It was my old boarding school friend and drinking companion, Eddie. Even over the phone, I somehow knew that he was sober. I could not remember a time when he had been sober in New York City. Long ago, I had marked him for a hopeless case. I'd heard that they were going to put him away because of alcohol insanity. Eagerly, I said, come on over. We'll talk about the good old days. Why did I say that? Yeah, because my present was unbearable and I knew there was to be no future. Soon, Ebby stood beaming in the doorway. Then he was sitting across the kitchen from me. There was a big crock of gin and pineapple juice between us. Immediately, I felt that there was something different about Ebby. It was not only that he was sober, I couldn't put a finger on what it was. I offered him a drink and he refused. And then I asked, what's this all about? You say you aren't drinking, but you also say you aren't on the water wagon either. What's up? Well, said Abby, I've got religion. What a crusher that was, Abby and religion. Maybe his alcoholic insanity had become religious insanity. It was an awful letdown. I'd been educated at a wonderful engineering college where somehow I had gathered the impression that man was God. But I had to be polite. So I said, what brand of religion have you got, Ebby? Oh, he said, I don't think it has got any special brand name. I just fell in with a group of people, the Oxford groups. I don't go along with all their teaching by any means, but those folks have given me some wonderful ideas. Now, I know you're going to gag on this, but they taught me that I should try to pray to whatever God I thought there was for the power to carry out these simple precepts. And if I did not believe there was any God, then I had better try the experiment of praying to whatever God there might be. And, Bill, it's a queer thing, but even before I had done all this, just as soon as I decided that I would try with an open mind, it seemed to me that my drinking problem was lifted right out of me. It wasn't like the water wagon business at all. This time I felt completely released of the desire, and I have not had a drink for months. Eddie didn't try to pressure or evangelize me, and pretty soon he left. For several days, I went on drinking, but in no waking hour was the thought of my friend absent from my mind. I could not forget what he had said. In the kinship of common suffering, one alcoholic had been talking to another.
One alcoholic talking to another, and one alcoholic listening to another. Simple truths like these are still making a difference today. We have heard it said that the opposite of addiction is connection. Keep connecting by listening and sharing. Thank you for that reading. So much to ponder. Will someone volunteer to read story number 3? One of the first women of 12-step recovery.
I got you right over here. Sandy again, still leaning into the steps. Story number 3. Despite great opportunities, alcohol nearly ended her life. An early member, she spread the word among women in our pioneering period. She begins. What was I saying? From far away, as if in a delirium.
I heard my own voice calling someone Dorothy. Talking of dress shops, of jobs. This sound of my own voice frightened me as it came closer. Abruptly, I stopped speaking. Where was I? I'd waked up in strange rooms before, fully dressed on a bed or a couch. I'd waked up in my own room, in or on my own bed, not knowing what hour or day it was, afraid to ask. But this was different. This time I seemed to be already awake, sitting upright in a big easy chair in the middle of an animated conversation with a perfectly strange young woman who didn't appear to think it strange. She was chatting on, pleasantly and comfortably. Terrified, I looked around. I was in a large, dark, rather poorly furnished room, the living room of a basement flat. Cold chills started chasing up and down my spine. My teeth were chattering. My hands were shaking, so I tucked them under me to keep them from flying away. My fright was real enough, but it didn't account for these violent reactions. I knew what they were, all right. A drink would fix them. Must have been a long time since I'd had my last drink. But I didn't dare ask this stranger for one. I must get out of here. In any case, I must get out of here before I let slip my abysmal ignorance of how I came to be here, and she realized that I was stark, staring mad. I was mad. I must be. The shakes grew worse, and I looked at my watch. 6 o'clock. It had been 1 o'clock when I last remembered looking. I'd been sitting comfortably in a restaurant with Rita, drinking my 6th martini and hoping the waiter would forget about the lunch order. At least long enough for me to have a couple more. I'd only had 2 with her, but I'd managed 4 in the 15 minutes I'd waited for her. And of course, I'd had the usual uncounted swigs from the bottle as I painfully got up and I did slow spasmodic dressing. In fact, I had been in very good shape at 1 o'clock, feeling no pain. What could have happened? That had been in the center of New York on noisy 42nd Street. This was obviously a quiet residential section. Why had Dorothy brought me here? Who was she? How had I met her? I had no answers, and I dared not ask. She gave no sign of recognizing anything wrong. But what had I been doing for those lost 5 hours? My brain whirled. I might have done terrible things, and I wouldn't even know it. Somehow, I got out of there and walked 5 blocks past brownstone houses. There wasn't a bar in sight. but I found the subway station. The name on it was unfamiliar, and I had to ask the way to Grand Central. It took 3/4 of an hour and 2 changes to get back there. Back to my starting point. I had been in the remote reaches of Brooklyn. That night, I got very drunk, which was usual. But I remembered everything, which was very unusual. I remembered going through what my sister assured me was my nightly procedure of trying to find Willie C. Brooks' name in the telephone book. I remembered my loud resolution to find him and ask him to help me get into that asylum he had written about. I remembered asserting that I was going to do something about this, that I couldn't go on. I was 32 years old. My family had money. I had never known denial of any material desire. I married, so far so good, all according to plan, like thousands of others. But then the story became my own. My husband was an alcoholic. My divorce coincided with my father's bankruptcy, and I went to work, casting off all allegiances and responsibilities to anyone other than myself. For me, work was only a different means to the same end, to be able to do exactly what I wanted to do. For the next 10 years, I did just that. Headstrong and willful, I rushed from pleasure to pleasure and found the returns diminishing to the vanishing point. Blanks were more frequent, and I seldom knew how I got home. When my friends suggested that I was drinking too much, they were no longer my friends. I moved from group to group, then from place to place, and went on drinking. I wanted help, and I tried to cooperate. I had been hypersensitive, shy, idealistic. My inability to accept the harsh realities of life had resulted in a disillusioned, cynic, inwardly frightened, outwardly defiant woman who desperately needed a prop to keep going. Alcohol was that prop, and I didn't see how I could live without it. When my doctor told me I should never touch a drink again, I couldn't afford to believe him. I had to persist in my attempts to get straightened out enough to be able to use the drinks I needed without their turning on me. That was the point at which my doctor gave me the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, to read. I didn't like the mention of God or any of the other capital letters. If that was the way out, it wasn't for me. I was an intellectual, and I needed an intellectual answer, not an emotional one. I told my doctor so in no uncertain terms. I wanted to learn to stand on my own feet, not to change one prop for another, and an intangible and dubious one at that. And so on and on for several weeks, while I grudgingly plowed through some more of the offending book and felt more and more hopeless about myself. Then the miracle happened to me. It isn't always so sudden with everyone, but I ran into a personal crisis that filled me with a raging and righteous anger. And as I fumed helplessly and planned to get good and drunk and show them, my eye caught a sentence in the book lying open on my bed. We cannot live with anger. The walls crumpled and the light streamed in. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't helpless. I was free, and I didn't have to drink to show them. This wasn't religion. This was freedom. Freedom from anger and fear, freedom to know happiness, and freedom to know love. I went to a meeting to see for myself this group of freaks or bums who had done this thing. To go into a gathering of people was the sort of thing that all my life, from the time I left my private world of books and dreams to meet the real world of people and parties and jobs, had left me feeling an uncomfortable outsider, needing the warming stimulus of drinks to join in. I went trembling into a house in Brooklyn filled with strangers, and I found I had come home at last to my own kind. There's another meaning for the Hebrew word that in the King James Version of the Bible is translated salvation. It is to come home. I had found my salvation. I wasn't alone anymore. That was the beginning of a new life. There was a concrete program designed to secure the greatest possible inner security for us long-time escapists. The feeling of impending disaster that had haunted me for years began to dissolve as I put into practice more and more of the 12 steps. It worked. An active member of AA since 1939, I get my greatest thrill of accomplishment from the knowledge that I have played a part in the new happiness achieved by countless others like myself. The fact that I can work again and earn my living is important, but secondary. I believe that my once overwhelming self-will has finally found its proper place, for I can say many times daily, "Thy will be done, not mine," and mean it.
Wow, that story is from decades ago, but still rings true today. I know I personally resemble some things I just heard. Thank you. Another true story that we can and do recover. Someone, anyone who will read story 5, Jewish Gentleman.
I will. Thank you. Carol here again. A grateful alcoholic. This story is called A Drunk Like You. The more he listened at the meetings, the more he came to know about his own drinking history. In his own words, usually our stories start out by telling what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now.
Usually, our stories start out by telling what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now. For me, what it was like was nothing in particular. No problems, nothing special happened, nothing that I realized, anyhow. Only much later, when I started listening to other people and what happened to them and when and how, did I realize that those things were in my past also. My story starts in the middle. What happened? My family and I were attending a relative's bris, a Jewish ritual circumcision and baby naming ceremony. After the ceremonies and brunch, I fell asleep. When it was time to leave, they woke me up. The car ride home was very quiet. The wife and my 2 kids said nothing. Later that day, I found out what the problem was. When they came to wake me, I was very belligerent and threatening. I scared them. They were afraid I would hit them. That was it. I could see that something had to be done. My wife's sister-in-law, who is a social worker, suggested we see a counselor. I thought that might be a good idea. I was having anxiety attacks for no reason. I used to be able to demonstrate products to high-level executives of the corporation I worked for with no problem. Now, even minor product showcases were becoming difficult. Also, I was having trouble getting technicians to work for me. In the past, I had had my pick because I was good to work for and the projects were fun, with interesting new ideas. I always had a quick temper, but now things were getting out of hand. I would do things like beat up my desk with my desk chair. And the most serious thing to me was that I was contemplating suicide. I had an actual plan, a plan for an accident that would raise no question in the minds of the insurance company. So in a moment of sanity, I decided it would be a good idea to seek help. If I hadn't lost my marbles, they were at least very loose. So my wife and I found a psychiatric social worker at the local Jewish Family Services Agency. She saw us as a couple, then individually, then together, and so it went. When we were together, we worked on our interpersonal problems. When I saw her by myself, she would talk about drinking. I don't know why she kept bringing it up. I drank, but not that much. I never even mentioned my drinking, except maybe to say, yeah, I do drink, when she asked. It wasn't the problem, the other things were. One day she read me some questions from a pamphlet, which I answered honestly. She concluded that maybe I drank too much, and we talked about that for several sessions. One day she asked if I could limit myself to 5 drinks in a day. I said sure. Was I surprised when I found that I couldn't? This should have been my first clue that she might be right, but it didn't occur to me. Then I hit on a clever solution. I have several academic degrees, and someone as smart as I could solve this problem. The idea was to put off the first drink as long as possible and go to bed after the last drink. That worked out okay, and I told the counselor I was able to keep it to 5 a day with little or no problem. But she said if you had to control something, it was out of control. During one session, she suggested that I try not drinking at all one weekend. Okay, I said. She also suggested that I send the kids off somewhere for the weekend because I might be irritable. I used to watch a lot of late night movies. It was my time to relax by having a few drinks, a habit that started in night school when I had a full-time job and was studying chemistry at night. I had seen movie versions of what happened to people who had drinking problems. The Lost Weekend, Days of Wine and Roses, and others. And so I was nervous about raging, losing control, and maybe being violent as my wife said I was. So we packed up the kids and the booze, all of it, and took all to my wife's parents. Much to my surprise, the weekend went well. No problems. And in the next session, I told my counselor so. She said, "What about the meeting?" I said, "What meeting?" "The AA meeting," she said. "What AA meeting? We never talked about that," I responded. She said I had agreed to go to an AA meeting. So out came a meeting list. She explained about open and closed meetings. I decided on one I thought would be okay for me, a men's discussion group. They would be my kind of people, and the time fit into my schedule. The meeting list started on Sunday. I never started a project or anything else on a Sunday. Monday was my MASH night. Tuesday was Tuesday night at the movies, and I'm a big old movie fan. So Wednesday is when I decided to try this AA meeting. The meeting went okay. We talked about someone's problem with an anonymity break at his doctor's office. The people at the meeting were telling him stuff that made no sense to me, like live and let live, easy does it, one day at a time, use a serenity prayer, talk to your sponsor. And as we went around the table, it came my turn. Since they were all saying they were alcoholics, it wasn't too hard for me to say my name and, "Hi, I'm an alcoholic," and suggest that the man should just go to another doctor. He thanked me very much, and after the meeting, he said to be sure and come back next week. During the meeting, somebody mentioned spending too much time at discussion tables when we should have been spending more time at first step tables for newcomers. So I went to the first step table the following week. The discussion was very interesting. I didn't think I was powerless over alcohol, but I knew my life was unmanageable. One night we were talking about when we started drinking, and I was saying that I drank my whole life. Actually, I was given my first drink at my breast. That is usually done when a boy is 8 days old. So I said all Jewish boys start drinking early. I had to admit that After that, it was just the usual milk and juice until I could sit up at the table with the family. And then there would be kiddish wine every Friday night. Not great stuff. What we got was sweet wine and seltzer. So I didn't drink very much of it. I didn't like it. Later, I learned the definition of a social drinker, someone who could take it or leave it. When I was about 10 years old, we all came back from my cousin's bar mitzvah services to celebrate at my grandmother's house. There, I had my first real drink. All the adults went over to the table for a schnapps. There were all these little tiny glasses in front of various liquor bottles, and everybody was having one, so I had one too. It was good. It was smooth and warm and wonderful. I liked it and went back for another. This one wasn't smooth, it was hot going down, not as wonderful. After that, I drank what I could, when I could, where I could. Not much, not often, not as a 10-year-old. At that first step table, we figured out, or they did anyhow, that was alcoholic drinking. Having one and going back for a second right away. I know now I never had just one drink, ever. One night they were talking about how much they drank, and one guy said he had so many beers. The next guy talked about shots, one about mixed drinks I never heard of, another about so many pints, and on it went around the table. When my turn came, I said, I don't know. Wow, that much, they said. No, I said. I didn't know the amount. I drank mostly at home and poured some in a tall glass and drank that and did it several times. Well, how many times did you refill? I don't know. Somebody asked it another way. He wanted to know, how many did I buy? Well, I said, I stopped in the package store every day and bought one. Oh, he said. How many did you have left at the end of the week? Well, he had me there. None, I said. He said, a bottle a day, man. I never got to say another word. It was settled over my objections. I saw the counselor once a week, and I went to this men's meeting once a week, and everything was getting better. Once I saw somebody get a 90-day pin. I decided not to get one. Even though I couldn't see it from where I was sitting, I wasn't going to wear an AA sign. One day, somebody got a 90-day pocket piece that he could rub for luck, and I decided to get one of those. After my 3 months were up, I went to the literature guy and bought one. He said it would be nice if it was presented to me in front of everybody. I wasn't too keen on getting up in front of everyone. He said it would be good for the newcomers. It would show them that the program worked. So I told him okay, and asked the leader of the first step table to give it to me. They were paying him to run the meeting, or so I thought at the time. Later, I found out they were just reimbursing him for the snacks. So the following week, I got my pocket piece and thanked everybody for giving me the power over alcohol. Now I was more powerful than alcohol because for the first time in a long time, I could choose not to use it. A couple of weeks later, the large company I was with, which had relocated me and my family at their expense, had a large staff cutback. And I was cut back. Fired. I thought I was fireproof. I was in a very important position doing important work. I was the chief researcher in developing a new product. I was sitting in on strategic planning meetings. I was very upset. After all, I was better now and back to being a good employee and a team player, but to no avail. We were able to stay on site in special offices set aside for us to conduct our job search. As part of this job search, I was allowed to go to a professional convention being held in the Southwest. Now, somehow, between the time I lost my job and my flight to the convention, I decided maybe I was not an alcoholic and I needed to test that theory. After all, I was a researcher and things had to be tested. I decided that on the plane, it seemed like a safe place. I would put that question to the test. If I could have one drink and no more, I was not an alcoholic. Alcoholics can't do that. So when the stewardess came by to ask me if I wanted a drink, I said yes. She put my 2 little bottles worth in a glass on her, no ice, thank you very much, and went up the aisle. On her way back, she asked if I wanted another, and I said yes. I drank for the whole flight, before dinner, during dinner, after dinner. As we approached our destination, I searched in my pocket for a pen to fill out the in-flight magazine response card. I found this large coin. I took it out to see what it was. It was my 90-day pocket piece, and I was reminded of what I was doing. And the thought came to me, wow, those guys at the meeting were right. I am powerless over alcohol. I put that coin back in my pocket, and from that day to this, some 15 and a half years later, I have had no urge to drink. When I got back to my meeting, I told them what happened. I don't know why. It was not like the old me to fess up to anything. They were concerned only whether I was still drinking. And I said, no, I am not. I was worried that they were going to take my coin back. All they wanted to know was what I was going to do now. I had no idea. They did, however. They said I needed a sponsor. So I found a sponsor. They said I needed more meetings. How many? I wanted to know. They said I only had to go to meetings on days I would have had a drink. They said I needed to identify, not compare. I didn't know what they meant. What was the difference? Identifying, they said, was trying to see how I was like the people I was with. Comparing, they told me, was looking for differences, usually seeing how I was better than the others. One day we were talking about spiritual awakenings. Everyone talked a little bit about what happened to them and when and how and all that. Then it came my turn. I said I hadn't had one yet, but I was open to it. Well, 2 people were trying to talk to me at the same time. What have you been telling us about the airplane flight all this time? Well, I said, I was drinking and the coin reminded me of what I did, and I decided I was powerless and couldn't drink anymore and stopped. One man said, well, that's it. What more do you want? I said, what about the blinding white flash? What about it? He said. Read the big book. The appendix explains the concept of a sudden change and a gradual change, and that not everybody has a blinding flash. Oh, I said, that was it. That was mine? Yes, I was told. What more do you want? Actually, I wanted something more dramatic, and my sponsor said what he often did. So? And I found myself saying, well, if that's it, it will have to do. Have to do, he replied. It was bigger and better than most, and more importantly, it worked. You stopped and didn't start again. Well, that worked for me. I have stayed in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous long enough to find the program in the big book and to practice all its principles in all my affairs on a daily basis. The last big hurdle was closing the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. As a Jew, I was uncomfortable with it and decided to talk to my sponsor about it. So I said, the Lord's Prayer bothers me. I don't like closing with it. Oh, he said, what's the problem? Well, I'm Jewish and it's not a Jewish prayer. Well then, he said, say it in Jewish. I said it would still be the Lord's Prayer. Right, he said, then say something else that you like. Your higher power, whatever you call it is helping you, and you need to say thank you. That was a big step for me. I finally began to separate the religious aspects of my life from AA's spiritual program. Now, the big difference to me is that religion is the ritual, and we all differ there, and spirituality is the way we feel about what we do. It's about my personal contact with my personal higher power, as I understand him. Everything has turned around. I found a new job, which I then decided to leave. I opened my own business. I was able to put my 2 sons through college at large universities. My oldest son's great passion was to go on road trips to get away from me and away from home when it was time to come home on school breaks. Now he comes home regularly and brings friends. The younger son comes home often and calls regularly as well. My marriage is no longer on the brink and is better than ever, and the best is yet to come. All this and more I owe to the fellowship in the rooms and the program in the book.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. What a unique perspective from this gentleman. I personally learned so much from his experience, strength, and hope. We have two more speakers. Who will be reading Lois for us? Carol, will you read again?
Carol again. Yes, I will. Bill's wife, Lois, shares what it's like to be on the other side of the recovery coin, the Al Anon experience. As the wife of an early AA, some of our experiences and my reactions to my husband's changed life may be interesting to other wives.
Bill was an alcoholic, I believe, from the first drink he ever took, just a few months before our marriage. From then on, for the next 17 years, I did everything I could think of to keep him away from liquor. I'll tell a little of our life before AA to help explain some of my other emotions, my later emotions. Bill and I had no children, so I soon felt that my job in life was to help Bill straighten himself out. As time went on, he earnestly tried to stop drinking. He was always very remorseful and perplexed the mornings after. We would then resolve to lick this liquor situation together, launching off on some new tack. As his drinking got worse, all decisions and responsibility had to be taken by me. It was lucky that we were companionable, for gradually, as our social contacts were broken, we were thrust back on each other for company. In order to get away from alcohol over the weekends, I used to engineer some sort of outing, as we both loved the outdoors. If our pocketbook was flat, we might take the subway to the Dyckman Street Ferry and hike along the Palisades to some scenic spot, nibble our sandwiches and gaze at the view. Or we might ferry to Staten Island and walk there, perhaps broiling a steak over a campfire. We have hired a rowboat at Yonkers and using a bath towel as a sail, we floated up the Hudson to a spit of land near Nyack, where we camped and tried to sleep. We once went so far to get away from alcohol that we both gave up our jobs and took a whole year off. We spent that time motorcycling and camping over half the United States. These trips, though good for Bill's health, did nothing toward his permanent sobriety. In fact, his alcoholism grew steadily more serious. He lost job after job until I became entirely hopeless about him. And then, suddenly and finally, Bill straightened out through the help of an old friend. At once, I was convinced of his complete change and was, of course, extremely happy. Bill began to go to religious meetings and to work feverishly with alcoholics. I would go to meetings too and would try to share his newfound enthusiasm. He always had some drunk in tow and would work all night or get up in the middle of the night to go to the suburbs if one called him. We had drunks all over the house. Sometimes as many as 5 lived there at one time. One drunk committed suicide in the house after having sold about $700 worth of our clothes and luggage. Another slid down the coal chute to the basement when we refused him the front door. 2 others took to fighting, and one chased the other all around the house with a carving knife. The intended victim was saved by a third drunk who delivered the knife-wielding one a knockout blow.
Bill had found himself a job about this time, and it used to take him away from home a great deal. And I was left with one or more of the alcoholics to look after. Once, one of these boys lay in the vestibule all night and screamed invectives at me. I would not let him in. He was so loud, the passerbys all stopped, looked, and listened. Another time, it was 4 a.m. before I succeeded in towing a drunk home. He was anxious to be at his job the next morning, and we had gone out around midnight to look for a doctor, having been unable to get one to come to the house at that hour. I helped his shaky steps up and down the stoops, lit his cigarettes for him, and finally, when we could not rouse a doctor, held a drink to his lips. When I asked him how he then felt, he said, "Well, a bird can't fly on one wing." After a few more drinks, I managed to get him home, but he did not get to his job the next morning. I was once taken suddenly sick, and when my sister arrived to nurse me, she found 5 men milling around the living room muttering, "One woman can take care of 5 drunks, but 5 drunks cannot take care of one woman." Now, to describe my reactions to it all, when Bill first sobered up, I was terribly happy. But soon, without my realizing it, I began to resent the fact that Bill and I never spent any time together anymore. I stayed at home while he went off somewhere, scouting up new drunks or working with old ones. My life's job of sobering up Bill, with all its former responsibilities, was suddenly taken away from me. I had not found anything to fill the void. And then there was the feeling of being on the outside of a very tight little clique of alcoholics into which no mere wife could enter. I did not understand what was going on within myself until one Sunday, Bill asked me to go with him to a meeting. To my own surprise, as well as his, I burst forth with, "Damn all your meetings!" and threw my shoe at him as hard as I could. This bad display of temper woke me up. I realized that I had been wallowing in self-pity, that Bill's change was simply miraculous, that his feverish activity with alcoholics was absolutely necessary to his sobriety, and that if I did not want to be left way behind, I had better jump on the bandwagon too.
This is the other side of the coin. We are so grateful for the work of Lois Wilson. These stories are almost so vivid, they are coming to life for me. I can imagine some of you are feeling the way I do right now. These are the real stories of lives changed, and it's amazing that their words are still moving us today. Our final guest speaker tonight is someone who has never shared his story publicly. This evening makes the first time we ask that you welcome him with friendship and understanding. Neil, are you in the room? And you're muted, Neil.
Yes, I'm over here.
The floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. My name is Neil, and I am an alcoholic, and I'd like to do something that I was taught to do where I come from, that is like to qualify. So I went to my first AA meeting sometime in 1997, and I got sober right away on January 19th of 2007. So anyway, here is my story. I grew up in a small college town with deep roots on both sides of my family. Another thing that runs deep in my on both sides of my family is alcoholism. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old, and I am blessed to be able to remember some things from that early age. Some good, some not so much. One good memory, I remember going for boat rides with my parents. And one not so good memory is I remember lots of fighting. There was lots of fighting between my parents. And I remember that it would be so bad that I would crawl under my bed and I'd cry for us to go on a boat ride because I knew that they would stop fighting. These make up some of my earliest life memories. At any rate, both of my parents remarried several times each, and my mom always picked a raging alcoholic. As a consequence of this instability throughout my first 9 years, I was raised by my maternal grandparents. I am the oldest of four, so I have a half brother, a half sister, and a step brother. A completely normal childhood. At age 9, my mother married a firefighter, and we all moved in together. But this quickly turned into a never ending stream of chaos and fear. There were, of course, many good times, but the fighting and tension that goes on in an alcoholic house is a living hell, especially for a child. I learned lots of good life skills from them. However, looking back, I also learned the solution to everything was to drink and to get angry. And this is a lesson that I learned well. So I lived in this state until I was about 17. I was a senior in high school. I actually had pretty good grades in spite of my home life. And at which time I couldn't take this anymore. So I ran away from home and I ended up at my father's parents. So now I'm a high school dropout at age 17. And I had free reign to do whatever I wanted because my father's parents did not care one bit what we did. What could go wrong, right? So I spent the next 8 years working on my career as an automotive repair technician, which is fancy talk for a mechanic. And by the time I was 21, I was actually an ASE certified master technician. This was a bit young for this back then. Probably still today, but I don't know. The shop I worked at put me in contact with an organization called the SCCA, which is a huge racing organization. And as a result, I spent about 10 years traveling around the country taking care of race cars for people on the weekends. This exposed me to a lot of good, very good people, some of them were still there for me, even as my drug addiction destroyed even this career. So here I am. I'm in my early 20s. I have two promising careers going, surrounded by lots of caring people that liked me. And I was starting to engage in my music hobby. That's a whole nother story. And I vividly remember sitting at the local bar where I played lots of pool, pondering my situation and thinking that I had arrived in life. So, some context is needed here. Up to this point, I had been drinking very heavily since I was in seventh grade. I smoked a little pot, but I never really liked that. I did like doing hallucinogens, though. Anyway, at age 21, I totaled my sixth car in a bad accident, which introduced me to pain pills for the first time. And to top it off, I was so lucky that I got one of those doctors who told me that I should never be in any pain because we have modern medicine to prevent that. So I took pain pills for that accident for the next 4 years. Well, you mix these with a bottle of wild turkey, and my reality was changed. Actually, I think the correct adjective was not changed, but rather distorted. Little did I know at the time that I was spiraling out of control. Even to this day, with all of the knowledge I have, it amazes me just how much denial had taken over my life back then. So, fast forward a little bit. 1996 was a very eventful year that shaped the rest of my life. I was 25 years old, and I found out that the girl I had fallen in love with was married to a Marine who had been away fighting in the Middle East. I also found out that I had a 3-year-old daughter from a previous girlfriend. I lost my job at the repair shop because of my drinking, and the aforementioned daughter was moved across the country by her mother just as I was getting to know her. And to cap off the year, the day after missing my first family Thanksgiving because of my drinking. I was just too hungover to show up. My father committed suicide. The last words he said to me via, excuse me, trying to inject a little humor here. The last words he said to me via answering machine, if you remember those, were, quote, "Thanks for being there," unquote. Anyway, please forgive me. I am not proud of what I'm about to say, but it is important as it sets the stage for much justification over the next 10 years of my life. Please excuse my voice. I used his suicide as an excuse to completely go off the rails. I started snorting cocaine, freebasing, and I eventually landed on smoking a lot of crack. It really was like I was watching myself in a dream or a nightmare or something. It just didn't seem real. This lifestyle quickly landed me in my first mental ward at our local hospital. After being there a few days, I remember an older man named Dave came to see me, and that was my introduction to AA. This is known in recovery as a 12th step call. So, my first AA meeting was in the basement of this hospital in my hometown. A nurse took me down there, and I had a bright pink bracelet on. I had bright pink slippers on my feet, and this indicated that I was from the mental stabilization ward. There were 10 people in that basement at this meeting, and I knew all 11 of them. I was humiliated. And comprehensible demoralization sound familiar to anyone? This, however, this was only the beginning of my troubles, but the recovery seed had been planted. For time's sake, I will generalize the next 10 years of my life. I think you'll get the rhythm of it. I was in and out of mental wards and treatment centers. I had several suicide attempts myself. My family sent me to many therapists and psychiatrists. I was arrested, I don't know how many times. I was put on probation. I was put on house arrest. And I even ended up homeless the last few years. I lost all of my jobs, was completely unemployable, and my family had all but disowned me. Now, only in AA does this make sense. But through all of this, I only have 4 felonies on my record. And can you believe they were for profit sharing? Who would have known? However, the district attorney called it forgery, hence the felonies. I deserve many more, I am quite sure. During this time, I went to meetings for I guess the last 7 years of those 10 years, I went to meetings every day, but I could not manage to stay sober for more than 5 or 6 months at a time. But I kept coming back because somehow I was drawn to recovery, even though I had convinced myself that I was constitutionally incapable of getting sober. But I now know that that was simply untreated alcoholism. Now, for the last few years before I got sober, I had moved to Ocala, Florida, where I was introduced to the Lost and Found Club. This proved to be of paramount importance in my recovery journey for many reasons. This was a place where when I felt that the rest of the world would be better off without me in it, I would go and get just enough love and hope to carry on for one more day. The welcome atmosphere and caring people was an oasis in my life of misery and loneliness. And the fact that they would not only accept me, a homeless bum who had not had a shower in 3 weeks, but they would give of themselves and try to help me, was a wonderful place. Throughout all of the darkness I am trying to summarize, one constant life-saving person was a lovely woman who I terrorized with my untreated addiction for many years. Not only her, but also her 3 children. But she tells me that she saw through all the chaos and knew there was more to me than what had become of my life at that time. If it had not been for her support and her rejecting me for a time, I might not have made it to my surrender. There were countless other people, but she was special. Anyway, my surrender finally came as I was sitting in jail again. Family and most of my friends completely done with me, and I was the loneliest person in the world, without a doubt. With nothing else left in my life, I figured I would devote myself to studying the big book that I'd heard so much about in these meetings I'd been going to. During this studying, I came across a passage in the chapter called Two Employers that asked a series of questions. The last one being, quote, "While I take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever," end quote. This was intriguing to me. This passage proved to contain the most important message I ever received in my life, and that was a message of commitment. Today, I believe that I surrendered in that moment, which enabled me to make a commitment to recovery for the rest of my life. This commitment then freed me to devote my energies into getting better instead of just not drinking. I call it investing in myself. This I did one day at a time, and it required lots of work on my part and lots of learning how to accept help from others, which is still sometimes hard to do. However, the return on investment has resulted in a complete change in my life, for I now have been married to that lovely woman who rejected me for a while for over 10 years. I have a wonderful relationship with our children and grandchildren, and what's left of my family and friends as a whole. I look forward to and cherish spending time with all of them as often as possible. This is not to say there are not hard, trying times. There certainly are. And it took years to clean up the legal and financial mess I had made of my life. But the general theme of my existence has gone from hopelessness and misery to one where joy and miracles are a commonplace occurrence. A life where some of my greatest joy is actually watching this realization happen in other people's lives. To be able to be there and provide for and support my friends and family on a level that I thought was only possible in Hallmark Channel movies. But this is my life today, full of more joy than I sometimes think I deserve. So thank goodness I am not the judge of that. Can I go back to the Lost and Found Club for a second? I sometimes regret that I was not capable of appreciating that kind of love at that time, but I fully understand it now, which is why I spend lots of my energy doing anything I can to help make sure that it is still there for anyone seeking the same refuge I found there. For without it, I would not be here today telling this story to you. And it's not just me, I am one of thousands. And not a week goes by that I don't overhear someone at the club saying how important the club being there is to them. And for as long as I can, I will do all that I can to make sure that the doors and lights are always on for them. So in closing, there is so much loneliness and darkness that I did not or I cannot articulate here. And I hope that most of you cannot comprehend that a human being can survive with such prolonged misery and hopelessness. But for those of you who can, I hope you have found this simple, not always easy, solution. Although it's way easier than that old life. It all started with a willingness to do something different, to try something even though I knew it would not work for me, to surrender, not to drugs, but surrender to the 12 steps of recovery. With the values I learned in AA today, I have built up a very successful business that employs about 25 people. I give as excuse me. I give back as much as I can to my community, and I devote lots of time to helping others whenever I can. I now feel like I'm a part of something much greater than myself. Heck, I'm even glad to pay my taxes today. Not bad for a guy who used to eat out of dumpsters. I am forever indebted to AA and the people it brings together that make it so special. So, in closing, with the life recovery has given me today because of the past I come from, I am able to sum up my story in 4 little words. And those 4 words are, it was worth it. Thank you.
Neil, that is so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your strength and your hope. We almost need a few minutes to reflect on your sharing. Will you be available after our meeting to speak to others? I am most moved by your words and by your journey, and I am sure others here with us feel the same way. If you have been inspired, we have a way for you to express that, and we will share how you can be part of the solution shortly. I personally want to thank everyone for being part of our meeting tonight, and more importantly, for being part of the solution. Every day we don't contribute to the chaos and the personal and societal problems of alcoholism and substance abuse, we are part of the solution. Since our meeting is almost at an end, is there anyone here who is celebrating a milestone? As we have chips for 1 day, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months.
I do. Carol here. 5 years today. Yay!
What a great beginning you have created for yourself. Congratulations. Is there anyone here willing to be a sponsor and support a fellow in recovery? Wonderful. If you see a hand here, be sure to reach out to that helping hand in the meeting after the meeting. And now we come to the end of our meeting, and a way we can all help keep sharing this life-giving message. I have a real basket and a virtual basket. You can give to the Lost and Found Club by donating online to the Lost and Found Club at, and Sandy, will you give the
Yes,
web address?
yes, the web address will be posted in our chat here. As you know, this is a live reveal of our show, so we'll have that information for you. Thank you so much.
And
we'll go to announcements, I think.
basket.
Yeah.
Are there any announcements for the good of AA or a burning in your heart that you have to share?
Yes, I do have something in my heart.
Okay, Carol.
In this one moment of time, we have come together to hear the true stories of those who have lived long enough to learn that we can and do recover. If this is a message that you believe should be shared and shared again, again, and again, then by all means, please use this time as your beginning of commitment to help those who are in need of recovery, help in our community. 12-Step Recovery is a we program, and we are a solution-oriented, and we have no greater desire than to see healing and wholeness in our community. There are so many ways you can help, and you are needed more than ever to help all generations gain sobriety and a peaceful way to live.
Thank you, Carol. You've been quiet you've sort of been quiet, but not really in this meeting. And but you've saved your best for last. Well, it's that time of the evening. Will everyone please join us for our closing? And we are mindful of what both Dorothy and story number 5 said. If the prayer is difficult for you, speak it in your own way to the God of your understanding. Now, Sandy, will you lead us in the Lord's Prayer?
Certainly. So,
right.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, now and forever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works if you work it.
We do recover, and it works.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for a great meeting, everyone. But just like any other meeting, we need to put this room back the way it was. Will you all help us with cleanup? All hands on deck?
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Okay, I got this. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today. This is our recording of our what we did in March. And if you haven't appreciated what you've seen today, please reach out to us on our YouTube channel. You will see links where you can get help. We will provide those for you, and we are so thankful that you are with us today. We appreciate you. See you again soon. Bye-bye.